My wife was dancing with the boss. They both laughed, looking at each other with an intimacy that made me lose my breath for a few seconds. The room was full, people around were talking, toasting, but for me, everything was silent. The scene seemed to be in slow motion. I watched their bodies too close together, his hands touching her waist, and the smiles shared as if they were a forbidden secret. I approached, unable to believe what my eyes were telling me. My heart raced so much that I could almost hear it beating in my ears. She hadn't seen me yet. I was immersed in that moment with him, as if I had never existed. My fists clenched, and a part of me wanted to explode there, in the middle of that party, unmasking everything. But another part, the one that was destroyed, froze. I wanted to see how far it would go. Then, she saw me. His eyes widened in pure panic. She stopped dancing, tripping over her own feet. The smile disappeared from his face, replaced by a mask of guilt. She knew. I knew I had seen everything. The second our eyes met, I knew there was no going back. Please. Listen to me, she stammered, trying to get closer, but I was beyond listening to her excuses. Every word that left his mouth was a knife spinning deeper into me. I can explain, she begged, almost desperately, as I walked away. Explain what? His touch. Their intimacy. The time they spent laughing together while I wasn't around. What else was she hiding from me? My hands were shaking, my mind was filled with a hurricane of questions that I didn't want answers to. It was obvious what was happening. I knew it from the moment I saw them together. It's too late, I whispered, with a firmness that surprised me. There was no room for forgiveness at that moment. The betrayal was embedded in me, every detail of that scene engraved like a mark that would never disappear. But there was something more. Something in her gaze, in the desperation of her words that seemed greater than simple infidelity. Something she couldn't put into words as her hands shook and her eyes filled with tears. Please don't go, he pleaded, his voice choked with something other than fear. It was more than regret. It was dread. I knew it wasn't just the fear of losing the marriage. It was something deeper, dirtier. And then, in that instant, something crossed my mind. Something I didn't want to believe, but that made everything start to make sense. Why was she so desperate? Why the boss? The panic on her face, the way she begged me. This wasn't just a casual betrayal. There was something more. Something she couldn't hide, even when she tried. I turned to leave, unable to bear another second of the pathetic scene. But before I could take another step, she grabbed me by the arm, her eyes red with tears and despair. I'm pregnant, she said, almost breathless, the words coming out in a rush. My body paralyzed. The words echoed in my mind, each syllable hitting like a blow that left me breathless. I felt the ground open beneath my feet as her face distorted between guilt and terror. And that's when I realized, the sun wasn't mine. And now? New York pulsed with its usual frenetic energy, the bright lights reflecting the city's relentless pace as people ran in pursuit of their dreams and, sometimes, away from their nightmares. For Alex and Megan, the city was the setting for a life built together. 10 years of marriage that, in the eyes of those who knew them, seemed solid, almost unshakable. Alex was a man with a steady gaze, with the attitude of someone who had faced challenges throughout his life. Working at an architecture firm, he was proud to have built a solid career, a stable home, and a peaceful life with Megan. However, behind his calm expression, there was a growing uneasiness. Over the past few months, something has felt different. Dinner conversations became scarcer, touches, once full of affection, now seemed mechanical, as if they had been emptied of meaning. Megan, on the other hand, was a woman with a striking presence, with sparkling eyes that used to light up any room. When they met, she was a young woman full of dreams and ambitions, working as an assistant at an advertising agency. Over time, she grew professionally, gaining respect and recognition. However, in recent weeks, Alex had noticed something new about her, an inexplicable distance, as if part of the woman he loved was disappearing. He tried to ignore the discomfort at first. Megan had always been an independent woman, with her own projects and desires. He respected that. But there was something about the way she looked at him now, or rather the way she avoided his eyes, that bothered him. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken words, with truths that they both seemed afraid to confront. On an ordinary night, as Alex ate dinner alone at the kitchen table, he looked at the plate in front of him and wondered where everything had started to fall apart. Megan had said she would work late, something that had become a frequent excuse in recent months. She's just busy, he tried to convince himself. Her job demands it. But deep down, he knew something more was going on. The smell of expensive perfume on their clothes, the brief and mysterious calls, the physical distance that grew between the two, everything indicated that something had changed. Megan, on the other hand, felt suffocated by the life she had built. She loved Alex, or at least she believed she did. But there were days when the weight of the routine fell on her like a ton of stones. The work absorbed her, demanded more and more of her, and sometimes, when she left the office late at night, she felt that the only thing keeping her going was the adrenaline of being at the top. But, upon returning home, that adrenaline dissipated, giving way to a void that she couldn't fill. Life with Alex was good, but was it enough? Megan found herself reflecting on this when she was alone, sitting at the window in her office, looking out at the city that never slept. Outside, the world seemed vibrant, full of possibilities, while inside her, something was slowly dying. She couldn't explain what it was, maybe it was marriage, maybe it was work, or maybe it was something much deeper that she wasn't ready to face yet. The weekend arrived with the promise of an important event, the annual party at the company where Megan worked. It was a grand event, always held in one of the city's most luxurious halls, where top executives gathered to celebrate the company's success and, of course, make valuable contacts. Alex always attended the event alongside Megan. That year, however, he hesitated. The work had left him exhausted and the idea of spending the night surrounded by people he barely knew didn't sit well with him. "You are going?" Megan asked casually as she adjusted an earring in her ear, checking herself out in the mirror. "I don't know, maybe I should stay home this time," Alex replied, watching her from a distance. She looked different that night. The tight black dress highlighted her curves, and her hair was impeccably tied up, as if every detail had been carefully thought out. "It's going to be important to me," she insisted, but there was a coldness in her voice that he couldn't ignore. He nodded reluctantly. He knew he should go, support his wife as he had done on so many other occasions, but something inside him prevented him from feeling excited. Megan, however, seemed distant, already immersed in the party before even leaving the house. Hours later, Alex arrived at the salon. The place was packed, full of laughter and conversation. The sound of clashing glasses and soft music filled the air. He looked for Megan among the people, but it took him a while to find her. When he finally saw her, she was laughing, her face lit up with a joy he hadn't seen in a long time. But he wasn't the one who made her smile. Beside her, a tall man in an impeccable suit leaned in to say something in her ear, and Megan laughed, her hand resting casually on his arm. He was her boss. Alex already knew him from other parties, but had never seen him like that, so close to his wife. He felt a pang of discomfort in his stomach. It wasn't jealousy, he didn't think it was. It was something different, something I didn't know how to name yet. He approached slowly, watching every movement, trying to understand if it was just his imagination or if there was something wrong. Megan didn't see him right away, she was completely caught up in the conversation with her boss, and Alex wondered when she had started to feel more comfortable with another man than with him. A bitter feeling came over him, but he remained silent, watching from a distance, trying to process what was happening. When Megan finally noticed him, her smile faltered for a moment. She tried to hide it, but Alex saw the discomfort in her eyes. He knew something was wrong, but he wasn't ready to confront her. Not there. Not that night. The air was thick that night, charged with a tension that Alex couldn't name. The party continued around him, with laughter and conversation spread throughout the room, but everything seemed distant to him. Faces blended together, and the noise of cutlery and wine glasses became just background noise, like a soundtrack to the confusion that was beginning to take over his mind. Megan, on the other hand, seemed to be perfectly integrated into her surroundings. She walked around with grace, exchanging words with her colleagues, her eyes shining, while her boss was always nearby, like a shadow. Alex's discomfort grew every time he saw the two of them together. It was subtle, but the intimacy between them seemed to have a life of its own. He tried to push away the thoughts, but doubt had already set in. Something between them was different, and he couldn't ignore it. All night Megan barely looked at him. The smile she used to reserve for Alex was now being given to someone else. And the more he watched, the more evident the distance between them became. Every laugh she shared with her boss made something inside Alex twitch. Where had it all gone? Their complicity seemed to have dissolved somewhere he could no longer reach. He grabbed a glass of wine from a passing tray and took a quick sip, trying to ease the tension pulsing in his chest. But nothing seemed to help. Every second, the scene unfolded before his eyes, and he was just a spectator of what seemed like a cruel play. He tried to get closer, but the emotional distance between him and Megan seemed greater than the physical space that separated them. There was something wrong, deeply wrong, and it consumed him. Suddenly, Megan looked in his direction, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. There was a split second when Alex thought he saw something in her gaze, maybe guilt, maybe nervousness. But before she could interpret, she looked away, returning to smiling at her boss, who now seemed even more involved in his conversation with her. Alex's discomfort was almost tangible. He knew something was about to happen, but he still couldn't put all the pieces together. The night went on, but for Alex, every minute dragged on. He tried to mingle among Megan's colleagues, exchange a few words, but his eyes always returned to the two of them. The way they laughed together, the complicit looks, the brief but intentional touches. Each gesture seemed to tell a story that he didn't yet know. At one point, he decided to go outside for some air. He needed to distance himself, try to understand what he felt. The night outside was cold, and he felt the cold air in his lungs a relief. He walked through the garden, trying to organize his thoughts, but everything seemed like a whirlwind. As much as he tried to convince himself that he was exaggerating, something inside him screamed otherwise. After some time, he decided to return to the salon. When he entered again, he saw them. Megan and the boss were in a more private part, away from the crowd. They were too close to each other. The closeness between them was disconcerting, and Alex felt his stomach drop. The boss was touching her arm, and Megan didn't seem uncomfortable, on the contrary, she seemed almost too comfortable. He didn't want to believe what was before his eyes, but the fear and insecurity were now impossible to ignore. Alex stood there, watching from afar, without being seen, as if he needed to be sure of what he already knew. With each gesture, with each look exchanged between the two, his suspicion grew. What had once seemed like a vague doubt was now beginning to turn into a painful certainty. The party continued, but Alex was no longer part of it. He was immersed in his own nightmare, and everything around him seemed to have lost its color. He needed to know the truth. He needed to confront her, even if what came next was devastating. He waited for a moment for the two of them to be distracted and, when Megan walked away briefly, he followed her. Arriving at a more isolated corridor, Alex called her in a low but firm voice. She stopped and turned around, surprised to see him there. "We need to talk," he said, trying to keep control of his voice, which was about to crack. Megan looked at him for a moment, but there was something in her gaze that confirmed everything he feared. She hesitated for a moment, as if trying to decide what to say, but the words seemed to slip out. "What's going on, Megan?" he asked, voice now thick with pain. "You and him," she didn't respond immediately. The silence between them was like a blow. Alex could see the guilt in her eyes, but still, she tried to hide it. Alex, you are imagining things. It's not what it seems. Isn't that what it looks like? He repeated in disbelief. Her every word was a blow to the confidence he had, and he felt the anger rising along with the pain. I'm not stupid, Megan. I saw you. I saw how you look at him, how he touches you. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, as if the truth was finally weighing her down. And then, as if she could no longer run away, she whispered, Alex, please, not here. We can talk at home. He knew the answer was already there, even before she said anything. Everything he had avoided confronting over the past few weeks was now exposed, even if it hadn't yet been said in words. Megan sighed, defeated, and Alex felt the ground beneath his feet disappear. The silence of the night weighed like an unspoken sentence as Alex and Megan walked home. The journey, which normally took about 30 minutes, seemed to have gone on indefinitely, every second fraught with tension. He drove in silence, his eyes fixed on the road, trying to process the whirlwind of thoughts running through his mind. Beside him, Megan had her hands clasped in her lap, her restless fingers betraying her agitation. Her nervousness was palpable, and with every second of silence between them, the emotional distance seemed to increase. The lights of the house appeared in the distance, a beacon of normalcy that contrasted with the reality that now threatened to crumble between them. Alex felt his stomach drop as he parked the car in the garage. Everything he knew, everything he believed about his marriage, was about to change forever. There was something Megan wasn't saying, he knew that. She had asked to talk at home, but deep down, Alex felt that the truth would be more painful than he could bear. As they entered the living room, the familiar environment that had been so comforting for years now seemed claustrophobic. Megan sat on the couch, her shoulders hunched, as if she were carrying the weight of the world. Alex remained standing for a moment, watching her. He knew that what came next would be definitive, something that would forever change the way he saw her. So, he began, his voice hoarse with tension, what do you have to tell me? Megan looked up, her eyes were teary. She took a deep breath, trying to gather the courage for what she was about to confess. Every second seemed to drag by. Alex. I never wanted it to be like this. His voice was shaking, and the words seemed too heavy to say. I know what I did is unforgivable. So you admit it, he interrupted, his voice filled with pain and suppressed anger. You were with him. There's no point in lying anymore, Megan. She nodded slowly, the tears she had been trying so hard to hold back now starting to stream down her face. Yes. I was with him. The words, even though spoken softly, sounded like a gunshot. Alex felt a mix of relief and despair upon hearing the confirmation. Part of him already knew, from the moment he saw them together, but another part was still trying to cling to an alternative reality, where everything was just a misunderstanding. How long? He asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. It was as if he needed to know every detail, even though he knew that each answer would be a blow to his already fragile soul. Megan hesitated, running her hands over her face, trying to compose herself. A few months. It was, stupid, Alex. I got lost in the middle of it all. I'm not justifying it, because there's no justification, but it happened. And I'm sorry. He laughed bitterly, a sound that brought no joy. Are you sorry? And you hope that resolves it? That everything can simply be erased with a sorry? What happened to you, Megan? When did we get lost? She shook her head, unable to find an answer to that question. I ask myself this question too, Alex. I don't know. I don't know when things started to fall apart. The silence between them was thick, and Alex felt the ground crumble beneath his feet. Everything he had built, everything he believed about his marriage, was crumbling right before his eyes. Why him? The question came out before he could stop himself. That was what tormented him most. Why her boss? Why that particular man? Megan closed her eyes, as if the answer hurt her as much as he did. I don't know, Alex. There is no specific reason. He was there, paying attention to me when I what? He interrupted, the pain now turning to anger. When I was trying to keep this marriage going. When I was working to give us a stable life. When was it, Megan? Explain to me when I stopped being enough for you. She broke down in tears, unable to find the words to justify the unjustifiable. Alex took a step back, as if he needed space to breathe, trying to process it all. The weight of the betrayal hit him in waves, ever more intense, and he felt like he was drowning in a pain he couldn't contain. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to gather strength. All he wanted was to wake up from that nightmare. But there was no escape. Did you break up with him? He needed to know. Megan nodded quickly, desperate for him to believe her. Yes, of course yes. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake, but it's over. Alex crossed his arms, fighting the urge to scream, to break everything around him. The suffering was overflowing. And you expected me to never find out? That all this would go unnoticed? I don't know, she replied, her voice weak. I never wanted you to find out. I never wanted to hurt you, Alex. He stared at her for a few moments, feeling a mixture of pity and repulsion. The woman he had loved for so many years now seemed like a stranger. But you hurt me. And you knew you were doing it. From the moment you started with him, you knew. Silence once again dominated the room, but it was different now. There were no more secrets about what she had done. Megan had betrayed him. And, no matter how hard he tried, Alex knew that that wound would never heal completely. For a few minutes, neither of them said anything. Megan cried silently, while Alex remained standing still, trying to process the new reality. However, even in the face of the revelation of betrayal, there was something else in the air. Something he couldn't identify, but that, deep down, made him uneasy. And then, as if a dark thought finally took shape, Alex looked at Megan, and his voice was low, almost fearful. There's something else, isn't there? She raised her face, her gaze filled with a fear he had never seen in her. It was as if something heavier, something even more terrible was about to be revealed. There's something you haven't told me yet, Megan. I can feel. What else are you hiding from me? She looked away, her breathing quickening. Fear was written in every line of his face. Alex approached, anger now giving way to icy determination. Megan, if there's anything else, I need to know now. She hesitated, biting her lip, tears still flowing. And then, in a shaky voice, she murmured, I don't know how to tell you this. Then say it, he insisted, his patience at its limit. And it was at that moment that she completely fell apart. Megan buried her face in her hands, and between sobs, she whispered the words that Alex would never have imagined hearing. I'm pregnant. Those 3 words hung in the air, freezing time. Alex felt the world stop around him. Pregnant. The word echoed in his mind, over and over again, as he tried to understand what it meant. For a second, he wanted to believe it was a miracle, that despite everything, it could be the start of something new between them. But then, reality hit him hard. The son was not his. The silence that followed Megan's revelation was suffocating. Alex, still standing, felt the weight of those words sink into him like an anchor. She was pregnant. And although the shock had paralyzed his body for a few seconds, the inevitable pain came soon after. The certainty that the child was not his began to take shape, transforming the already open wound into something almost unbearable. He took a few steps back, trying to process what that meant. All thoughts were confused, and for an instant, the world seemed to spin around him. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to focus, but the truth was crushing him from the inside out. Megan watched, her face still wet with tears, waiting for his reaction, unable to predict what he would do next. Time seemed to have stopped between them, but inside Alex, a storm was brewing. Whose is it? The question left his lips with a coldness that he himself didn't recognize. Alex already knew the answer, but he needed to hear it from her. He needed Megan to confirm that so he could once and for all face the new reality that awaited him. She took a while to respond, as if saying the words would take away another piece of her. But, after all, everything was already lost. From my boss, he confessed, his voice breaking. Alex closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. The name was not necessary. He knew who the man was. He knew exactly who the child's father was. The betrayal was already devastating in itself, but the confirmation that the fruit of that forbidden relationship was now growing inside Megan made everything worse. This was more than he could bear. You knew from the beginning, didn't you? Alex's voice was low, almost a whisper. He was holding on to the thread of his composure, but the truth was he was on the verge of exploding. You knew you were pregnant when you looked at me at that party, when you tried to pretend everything was normal. All this time, you hid this from me. Megan nodded slowly, her eyes no longer had the courage to look at him. I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid. Fear. He laughed, a bitter, cutting laugh. What were you afraid of, Megan? Afraid that I would discover the truth, or afraid that his perfect life would fall apart for good? Because, guess what? She already fell apart. She put her hands to her face, sobbing softly. Alex's words, full of anger and hurt, were sharp, but he couldn't stop. Every word, every revelation, brought greater pain to the surface. He felt as if everything they had built over the years, the shared dreams, the happy memories, was now completely destroyed. Pieces of a life he could never fix. I was wrong, Alex. Megan murmured, still in tears. I let myself get carried away by something that should never have happened. I was confused, feeling alone. And now I don't know what to do. Now. He shook his head in disbelief. Now it's too late to feel sorry. Too late to try to find an explanation for what you did. Because there's no excuse for it. He turned his back, feeling that if he continued to look at her he might lose control completely. The ground felt unstable beneath his feet, and his head spun with the whirlwind of emotions. Everything he believed, everything he thought about their marriage, was over. He wanted to scream, to break everything around him, but at the same time, he felt a deep exhaustion, as if the entire weight of the betrayal was sinking into his chest, making it difficult to even breathe. Alex walked to the window, looking out into the darkness. He tried to find some way out, some point of light in the chaos that was now his life. But there were only shadows. The child Megan carried in her womb was not his, and the man who betrayed her, someone he could never imagine competing with, now had something he could never have. Megan was still sitting on the couch, her sobs echoing through the room, but Alex couldn't find room within himself for compassion. He had been betrayed in the worst way possible. And now, even if he wanted to, there was no turning back. The question that tormented him now was no longer what to do with the marriage, but rather what to do with himself. How to deal with the devastation that consumed him. Megan was pregnant by another man. And him? What would be left of him after all this? The moral dilemma that lay before him was overwhelming. As unbearable as the idea of continuing to be by Megan's side was, the other alternative was equally painful. Walking away now, letting her go on with her life with her boss and the child, and losing everything that was left. He knew that, whatever the decision, he would never come out unscathed. Alex turned, finally, and looked at Megan. Did you think about us at any point? The question was filled with pain. In everything we build, in everything we experience. Did you think about what I would feel when I found out about this? Or was it all thrown away the moment you decided to cheat? She looked up, her eyes red from crying. I thought, Alex. I thought, but I was lost. I wanted. I wanted things to be different, but I didn't know how to deal. He shook his head, tired, defeated. And now? What do you expect me to do, Megan? What do you want from me after all this? The question remained in the air, unanswered. Megan had nothing left to say, and Alex knew that no response from her could ease the pain he was feeling. The silence that followed Megan's confession was so heavy that it seemed to swallow all the air in the room. Alex couldn't look at her, nor could he muster the strength to speak. He was broken, destroyed in a way he never imagined possible. The weight of the betrayal and the pregnancy revelation had crushed everything he believed in, turning the life he knew into ashes. Megan was still sitting, curled up on the couch, her sobs now silent, but the tears were still falling. She knew that, at that moment, any attempt to remedy the situation would be futile. Everything she had done, the choices she had made, had led to her inevitable collapse. She had lost Alex. And with him, she had lost the chance to save what was left of her marriage. Finally, Alex broke the silence, his voice colder and more distant than ever. I can't do it anymore. I can't stay here and pretend that things will ever get better. You destroyed everything, Megan. All. He stood up slowly, feeling the weight of the decision he was about to make. He walked to the door, each step more difficult than the last, but also more certain. Their marriage had come to an end, and he knew there was no going back. He had been hurt beyond repair, and any attempt to move forward with her would only be a constant reminder of the betrayal. Megan tried to get up, but her legs wouldn't follow her. Alex, please. She tried to speak, but the words trailed off before leaving. There was nothing that could be said to change the course of that. She had made a terrible mistake, and now she was alone, facing the consequences. Alex opened the door, feeling the cold night air touch his skin. He looked one last time at her, sitting there, and said, with deep sadness, I can't forgive this, Megan. And you know it. I hope you can find some way to move on, but it won't be with me. And with that, he left. He left behind not just a home, but a lifetime of memories. Alex knew the road ahead would be lonely, but he also knew that staying in that marriage would be a prison. The pain he carried was immense, but somehow he believed that one day he would find a cure. But now he needed to get away from everything, rebuild himself from scratch. Megan, on the other hand, stood frozen in the room. She knew Alex wouldn't come back. She felt the weight of her own choice crush her. The regret was deep, but there was no way to reverse what he had done. The consequences were irreversible. She was alone, pregnant by a man who could never give her the love she had wasted. In the days that followed, Megan tried to contact her boss, the child's father, seeking some kind of support. However, to her horror, he made it clear that he had no interest in taking any responsibility. For him, the relationship had been just an affair, something without weight or meaning. She was alone with the burden of her choices. The boss didn't want to get involved, and Megan was left to face her new reality, raising the child of a man who didn't want her, while the man she loved disappeared from her life forever. Months later, Alex began to find some form of peace. He had walked away from everything, changed jobs and focused on rebuilding his life away from the memories of the past. The scars were still there, deep and painful, but he learned to live with them. I knew I could never forget what Megan had done, but little by little, anger gave way to acceptance. He understood that while he couldn't control her actions, he could control how she would react and move forward. Megan gave birth to a girl months later, and as she held her in her arms, she felt an overwhelming pain. Every time he looked at his daughter, he saw the reflection of his choices and the life he had destroyed. Raising her alone would be the biggest challenge of her life, and loneliness would accompany her for many years. She knew she would never get back what she lost. Alex, on the other hand, decided not to look back. The future was before him, and although he still carried the scars of betrayal, he also carried the hope that a new beginning awaited him, away from Megan, away from the past. Alex and Megan's story was marked by choices, regret and pain. But in the end, both were forced to face the harsh reality that some wounds never heal. Some betrayals are too deep to be forgiven. And for Alex, moving on without Megan was the only possible path. Now that you've followed this story to the end, leave your opinion on what happened in the comments. What did you think of Alex and Megan's decisions? And, of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. It's worth remembering, our channel does not support any type of betrayal. Loyalty is the foundation of any healthy relationship. Thanks for watching.